Hi, today I'm going to be showing you how to make your own tiny notebook. So this is what your finished product is going to look like with your own decorations, of course, but yeah, it's a little tiny notebook with several pages in it that you can write for yourself. So let's get started and I'll show you how to make that. So what you're going to need for this project is you're going to need some scissors, a pencil, a ruler, several pieces of paper. Yours doesn't have to look like mine, but you'll need some paper at some point. You're gonna want a cereal box or some kind of packaging that is that weight of the cereal box. A couple of binder clips, a thumbtack, a needle, and some thread. All right, so let's get started and I can show you how we're gonna do this. So the first thing you're gonna wanna do is you are going to want to cut down your cereal box to size. So I have an example of what this should look like when you're done. You're gonna want a 5 1/4 by 7 1/4 piece of cardboard for one notebook. So that's just why there's that number 1 there. So once that's all done, you're good to go. And then from your paper, you are going to want to have 8 pieces of 5 inches by 7 inches. So as you'll notice, this one's a little bit bigger than this. That's pretty essential because you want your pieces of paper to tuck neatly inside of your notebook. All right. So I'm gonna just go ahead and say I did all that already. And the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get my paper in a nice, neat stack. All the edges nice and neatly together. And then I'm gonna pop it on top of my piece of cardboard. So my piece of cardboard here is very plain and stuff, but you know, if you wanted to, you don't have to do it the colorful side out. You could do it the plain brown side out, whatever you wanna do. It is your notebook. We are gonna take the topmost piece of paper from our stack and we are going to draw a line down the middle like this. The best way to figure that out, we're gonna use our ruler, the same ruler you probably used when you were cutting out your pieces of paper. And we're gonna find the center point on this long edge. For me, that's gonna be 3 1/2 inches because I have done a 5 by 7 piece of paper. I'm gonna find the midpoint on the other long edge. 3 1/2 inches for me. Draw a line between those two lines. And you might want to make it kind of a lighter line because it can stand out really strongly. Okay, so now we have this line down the middle. Then the next thing we're going to do is we are going to put our ruler edge on that line. And then we are going to mark every 1/4 of an inch up from there. So just doing a little mark every 1/4 inch. All right, got our 1/4 inches made. Just got those little dots along there. So we'll pop that back on top of our sheet of other paper. Make sure to keep this one on top that you just drew the lines on so you can actually see it. Once again, we're gonna bind that in place with our binder clips. Right, it's not perfectly centered, but it's gonna work for what we wanna do. All right, so on each of those points you just made with your pencil at the 1/4 inch, you are now gonna take your thumbtack or a needle or something that is relatively sturdy and you are going to punch through every point that you just did. And what this is gonna allow you to do, see on this finished notebook how there's that thread running down the spine? This is what's gonna allow us to sew your notebook together. So be careful as you are punching to not stab yourself. All right, so as you can see on this other side, we have poked all the way through the cardboard. So that means we've been successful. The next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna get our needle and thread, and we're gonna wanna do at least 30 inches of thread. I'm gonna use my ruler for that. And I'm doing 30 inches because I am doubling over my thread. All right, so I've measured my thread to 30 inches just to make sure that I have enough. I'm gonna hold, if you're not familiar with threading a needle, hold just a tiny piece of thread in your dominant hand. So I'm right-handed, so I'm holding it in my right hand. I'm holding the needle in my non-dominant hand, which is my left hand. I'm gonna look at the eye here, and I'm gonna take my little bit of thread and just poke it through the eye there. It's one of those things that gets easier with time. So go ahead and pull up your ends so they're even. So when you're pulling the thread through, it's 2 threads, but we're not gonna tie a knot in the end. We'll show you when we get to that part. All right, so the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna turn our notebook so the cover is facing us. We're gonna take our needle with our thread on it, and we're gonna poke it through the first hole that we made closest to the edge. So you'll see my needle has come all the way through. I'm gonna pull this thread on through, but I'm not gonna pull all the way because then that won't really accomplish anything. Okay, I'm gonna leave it, so there's just a couple inches here left. And then I'm gonna hold those in place so that I don't accidentally pull them through. Flip this over so the pages are facing us, stab it through the next hole. Careful not to stab yourself. Pull this on through, and we're gonna pull this tight. See how that's nice and tight, but we haven't actually pulled through these threads on the side. So this is where we knot it together so we can keep sewing. So I've got my tail ends of my thread here, those little loose ends. I've got my working thread, or the thread that is attached to my needle. We're just gonna tie those together. We're gonna do a few knots because we don't want this to come undone later. I'm gonna do at least 2. You might wanna do more. You follow your heart. It's your notebook. I'm gonna go ahead and trim those ends because I don't like how they look when they're long. All right, so now we just get to keep sewing. Okay, so I technically could have marked another 1/4 inch there, but that would just be at the end of the pages. That's just gonna rip out, so I didn't do that. So now I'm gonna show you how to fasten this thing off. As you can see, I did have some extra thread. Again, that's not a bad thing because this next bit, we do need some working thread. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna take my needle and I'm gonna run it under this most previous stitch showing on my page side, or whichever your last visible stitch is. Run that through, and then the nice thing is, because I have 2 threads here, I'm just gonna cut, and I'm just gonna tie these 2 ends together a bunch of times. All right, so just looking, yep, got it secured there, got it secured on that end. Trim these down, take off my binder clips, because I don't need them anymore. I've got a notebook. So what you're gonna do for your last bit is we're just gonna fold in the spine along where it was. And now you've got yourself a little notebook. Look at that, it's not so bad. If you want, if you have something plainer like this, you could decorate it, or if you did choose to do that plain brown inside on your paper, you can use markers, tape, you know, whatever your heart desires. Make it your own. I actually kind of liked how this one turned out. This one I didn't personally decorate, but I did see, you know, some cool boxes and things that I made this out of, and that just turned out really nice. This one I tried to draw a D20 on, just because I like Dungeons and Dragons. And so yeah, make it your own notebook. Thanks so much for joining me today. Big shout out to Annie from Blossoms and Bullet Journals. These are her directions. I've just adapted them a tiny bit, but it's really hers. And so thank you so much for joining me. Please feel free to go to mesacountylibraries.org to check out some of our craft book lists and see what other cool events we have happening at the library. Take care.